Well, hello, everyone. I'm really excited for this panel discussion today and to be joined by these amazing individuals to help us drive this discussion. Just to kick this off, I'm just going to give a quick touch point on this discussion and what we're looking to get today. So this discussion is around diversity and inclusion in action. And over the past months, especially, we've heard from many companies about the actions and their commitments to drive diversity and inclusion in the workforce. But I don't think it is any longer about what we plan to do. Let's look at what has been done and how these actions in play are creating change, enforcing and enhancing and improving the identity and access management industry, the solutions we implement, but also what more we need to do and can do and not lose sight of the overall end goal. So today with me, I have Thomas, CEO of Ablimina, Shelley, Director, Product Marketing Management, Identity Verification, Entrust, and Adijat, Senior Manager, Enterprise Technology and Digital Recruitment, RVC. So just to jump right in, I'm going to start with the first question. I'm going to direct this at Shelley and Thomas. Right. So how important is it to drive diversity and inclusion, specifically when we consider the identity space?
Okay, well, I'll jump in. If we in the identity space don't take diversity, equity, and inclusion seriously, who will? I mean, we are actually the guardians of identity. We live and breathe identity. We build identity systems. We advise governments on the best practices for digital identity. I think every one of us have argued over the exact definition of identity, which includes every single person. I believe one of the things for real change for identity and inclusion is to not be afraid to look hard at ourselves, at our organizations. Because let's face it, as human beings, we can kind of cherry pick which things that we like to look at and which things we look good at. And I think that ends up being a big mistake. We can find the statistics that make us all look good. And that's not to say we shouldn't celebrate the incremental changes that we do, but we can always be better. We can always be more fair. We can always be more diverse and inclusive. And that includes us in our industries, in our corporations, in the systems that we build that are identity systems, in our everyday actions and interactions. And that's especially true in the identity sector.
Yeah, so well said, Shelley. I love the point about celebrating our wins, but also being critical of where we have to grow. And I think a lot of personal growth really comes through working with individuals who are diverse in thought from yourself, who look different, who think different, who come from different backgrounds. I think that's a huge opportunity. And I think that the teams that fail to be diverse will ultimately fail to innovate. A different view will always drive new innovation, and it'll improve adoption really among our user groups. And especially in cyber, don't we all dream of maximum user adoption? I mean, that's the utopia. So I think that's really key to what we're trying to build toward. And that starts with yourself.
Absolutely. Great points, both of you. So that leads me into my next question. And I'm going to direct this one to you, Shelley. Can you tell me about some of the actions you are seeing in play and the results of these actions?
This panel actually is pretty fortuitous for me because I come from a smaller company and we just got acquired by a huge company. So I've had to go through the onboarding procedures for employees. And I've been impressed with one of the things that Entrust has done, and this is one of the things that I can see in action. They have an initiative called Entrust Includes, and that's this big commitment to hearing the many voices of all the communities, to make sure that they're heard, to make sure that there's a sense of belonging inside corporations like themselves, and to make sure that everyone can be themselves. And there's 3 pillars of this, and I'll just hit on one of them, which is education. And education means the training that's available for everyone that comes on. And that training, one of the best training sessions that I've been through is called unconscious bias, which I think every corporation should actually implement. The unconscious bias ones helps people discover the bias and to act on with courage to make sure that there is real change within yourselves and with your interactions with people. There's 5 other training ones, and I'll just touch on them briefly. One is become a better ally. And I can't think of a better group of people to be talking about becoming a better ally, because I've read all of your profiles and it looks like we're all trying to be better allies, but it's always worth listening and hearing and learning about other ways that you can do that. There's another training course called the Diversity Advantage. And one of the things, you know, that Tom has already touched on, a more diverse staff creates better products, creates better innovations, looks at it from different points of view. Instead of having just the 80-20 rule, we have to think of the 100 rule. And that's especially in development. A few other training sessions that Entrust puts on has to do with generational, the difference between generational. And I think sometimes it's overlooked sometimes when you're in bigger corporations, that there is the older group and you have multi-generational things about, you know, becoming a better leader across generations, and also resolving generational conflicts, because within companies, that diversity and inclusion, if you can listen to each other, that actually helps resolve a lot of the conflicts that can, you know, simmer underneath. And they also have one more that's called Millennials at Work, which is just basically making sure that they fit in, making sure that their strengths are noticed, making sure they have a place to talk, to effectively build the relationships they need to. One of the real outcomes of this, and I'll just quickly say, is they just put in the unconscious bias training, and 406 people managers have completed that training, and it's gotten really good feedback. People have really enjoyed that and really learned a lot. As one of the tips, I just want to say that other corporations can use is Gartner has a 2021 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Functional Benchmarking Survey, which compares corporations from all over the world, all industries, and you can slot yourself in there and see, are you doing well compared to the global benchmark of diversity and inclusion? And Gartner has a few other free things like free podcasts and things. If you Google it, you'll be able to see them. And that's one of the things I would say is a good thing in action.
I think those are great points. I mean, you touched on a lot of things there that we have to keep in mind. And one of those is, you know, our unconscious biases and really, you know, breaking through those and actually challenging ourselves to understand what our own personal unconscious biases are. The allyship, being an ally, and what that means, and how to continue to improve on our allyship and you know, drive these discussions further and forward. I'm going to move on to my next question now. This one is directed to Thomas and Adijat. What are some of the things you've been able to implement on your teams to recruit diverse talent?
Yeah, perfect. So I'll start. You know, participating in events like these that garner new passion is a great start. You know, as Shelley's speaking here, I'm furiously taking notes of all the things I'm learning as well. So it's nice to be part of a panel that is teaching at the same time. I love it. You know, in terms of these events, I tell stories about how many great hires we've had out of our work with the Canadian Women's Foundation. So, you know, IWD or International Women's Day is not just shouldn't just be a day. Obviously, it's an all-round year effort we have to make. And we've found that our work with organizations like that and with women in identity wind up really driving the best talent toward us. So those organizations who are doing the right thing are really going to help us hire the best candidates for the roles. You know, what we have found through this process is we are starting to rewrite our job descriptions as we are posting them online. So we've become very aware that when somebody looks at a job description, they might discern that they have to check every single box in that job description, which is not the case at all. You know, these are all a blend of things we would like someone to have or someone to learn. So even if you don't have those skill sets today, what we're really seeking is the passion to get there, and that these are areas where you can from where you are today, sort of lateral into as you grow. Once we have candidates in our pool, we go through a process of really understanding, do we have a diverse group of people on our hiring panel? So the individuals that are meeting these candidates, are they diverse themselves? And can a candidate see themselves working for an organization that's diverse? We've started doing research to try to find ways to attract talent from other disciplines. So we all talk about how cybersecurity has this massive skill gap. How do we fix it? Part of it is gender. I think an equal and ancillary issue is the fact that for a long time, it was the typical application background or the networking background, and we're starting to see a lot of great talent come from other areas. Today, the easy one is risk. Tomorrow, it'll be something else. And so we really need to understand where is the other talent that is passionate about doing a lateral move into cyber and then into the even more skill gap area in identity. We are investing heavily in internship programs as well. And so I think if I look at RBC, for example, they have this great internship program as well. It's really important to nurture this culture at early stages and make our industry look like one that is appealing to these new grads and especially to women in STEM. I hear a lot of stories about folks who have either bounced out of the STEM technology field due to issues along the way that they have faced in terms of discrimination. Some, thankfully, have come back to it, but it shouldn't be a perseverance issue. It really should be one that's interesting along the way. And I think the proof is in how we measure. So measure what you want to reward or what you want to motivate, and we keep an active tracker. Are we a diverse organization? And if you pull bias out of your hiring process, you will find, as we have, we're at 60-ish% women in technology inside of our organization. So we've just found that you can be equalitarian if you just pull the bias out.
You made a good point, Bryen, actually, with a few things. I think on our side, what we've seen that has been very helpful is sometimes in order to have diversity, you have to decide, first of all, that it's business imperative. It's not just cool to have. That's the first part. We also have executive sponsorship where it's coming from the top down. It's coming at every level where we're going to hire, we're going to retain. It has to be at all levels. And what has been successful is intentional partnerships at the grassroots level. So if you want to eat a certain type of ethnic food in a city, you go to the neighborhood where that ethnicity resides to buy that type of food. So if you're trying to hire more diverse candidates, you would have partnerships. So if you're trying to hire more women, it would make sense. You would find partnerships where women are predominant. If you're looking to hire Blacks, Latinos, and everything else, you do the same thing too. So strategic partnerships is a huge one when it's at the grassroots, in the communities that you work in and you serve. That has been very successful when you have those partnerships. The other part of this is as recruiters, now I probably would always speak as a recruiter, but as recruiters, we're the gateway to the company. We're basically the first people would see when they start interacting with us. And you mentioned something that was really important there. You said the team that's recruiting, are they diverse? Do they understand that diversity? If somebody's coming to interview, can they see themselves at that company? Do they interact with people that they say, okay, you know what? I see people like me. I see people that think like me. It's not just looks, because we also need diversity of thought. So I think those are some of the quick wins that you put down. At every step of the way, you have to really have numbers that will guide you. You don't live by them, but you have targets that you set. If you don't have a target, then you're just playing, right? So you have to have a target of what you want to get to. It doesn't mean you must achieve it immediately, but there's something to strive to. So once you have a target, then you put in these intentional options where you have partnerships, you have the allyships, you have people that understand the recruiting process. And then internally too, not just bringing in, how are you retaining this talent, right? Because it's two-pronged. So there's that part of it too. So the education internally too is something that is very, very important. Because otherwise you're just going to bring people in and then they come in and they look around and they won't stay. So you want to attack both sides. So that would be where I would say implementing that on the teams has definitely been important. Having an understanding of the different types of diversity, what we need to do, what we shouldn't do, actually is probably more important. That type of information is crucial, because when you know that, then you can have that, I would say, parlayed to the next group that needs to interview them or work with them or promote them. And also we have to be educated on that.
Absolutely. You both, I'm kind of speed writing here because there are just so many good points there. You know, Thomas, you mentioned the passion to get there and not necessarily, you know, looking at a job posting and meeting all of what is in that posting to obtain the role. That there are a lot of individuals that are so passionate about getting into cyber and the identity space. I know I speak to many, and it's always, oh, but I don't meet everything. And you often have to look at what are your transferable skills that actually kind of align, and you come with that to what Adijat said, that diversity of thought, because you're coming actually from various sectors or different roles that actually help bring that thought process into a space that, you know, challenges us to think outside of the box a little bit and breaks that status quo, and just, you know, getting to the grassroots and the strategic partnerships. I think those were such great points by both of you. So thank you. I'm going to lead this into my next question now, and this one is for Shelley and Adijat as well. Once you have diverse teams, how do you ensure that the talent feels welcome to live as themselves? What are some of the tips you can provide to others? Shelley, did you want to?
I might as well jump in here. These are the two other pillars that actually was a part of the Entrust Includes that really impressed me. So first there was the education that I mentioned. The other two pillars are celebration and empowerment. And so they all hold up this, you know, the ability to have diverse and inclusion once you actually have a multicultural and multi-diverse staff. And so for the two things, so for celebration, this encompassed the ability to have one team for your employees to feel they're all part of one team. And that's a difficult thing to do, but it has to have intentionality. A part of that type of campaign would have to do with things like global events. And I believe Thomas mentioned the things around, you know, those international events need to be celebrated. The International Women's Day made into International Women's Week, made into International Women's Month, Black History Month, LGBTQ plus Pride, all of those different international opportunities to celebrate the differences between the groups of people that you have as part of your employees, to make them have a place to belong. Now, the other thing that also I wanted to mention, one of the events, and I haven't been able to do it yet because of COVID, and I'm hoping I'm going to be able to do it sometime soon, is things like cultural events like global diversity potlucks and things like that, where people can gather, be themselves, bring their backgrounds, their cultures, their food, and have interactive events like that really will help retain your staff, make them connected, make them feel a part, make them feel seen, heard, and obviously taste the foods that they are a part of, which everybody knows those are just good memories. The third pillar was empowerment. And I think a lot of corporations do this in different ways, but if you have employee research or resource groups, so those are those alliance groups, those things that people can join, be a part of. And I believe in Entrust, there is the Black Alliance, the Women's Alliance, LGBTQ Alliance, a Veterans Alliance, and a Neurodiverse Alliance as well. And there are many more planned. And one of the first things I did when I joined was I joined 2 of those alliances. I just finished my own onboarding, and I joined those 2 alliances. I've already been part of meetings. And part of giving people empowerment, has those types of employee groups decide what's important, decide for themselves what their strategies are going to be able to communicate to the entire corporation and external to that, be backed by the government. And that's part of what Adijat said as well, was the intentionality. It has to come from the top. There has to be budget. There has to be meaningful measurement. So there has to be KPIs associated with those types of programs within corporations. And if I had a tip, I think I'd say to anybody listening, any corporations, any part of the industry listening here, is don't stand still. We're never done. This is always there's always ways to do more, create more groups, do more events, figure out ways to do more communications, have real measurable actions, success, and compare yourself against others. We all have stuff to learn. So that's what I would say.
I like we all have stuff to learn. No matter how much you think you know, there's always going to be more for you to learn.
Absolutely.
One of the big things is, if we want to be able to make sure talent feels welcome, when someone comes to visit you at your house, the first thing you do is you want to find out, okay, what would you like to drink? What would you like to eat? That's our normal, that's our default mode as hosts or hostesses. And the same mentality should come in when we have new hires. So the first thing is, as they're coming in the door, you just mentioned something, Shelley, you had information to know which ERGs, which committees, which parts are available to you. And understanding, knowing where to go is paramount, okay? Otherwise, you could work for a company and not know that, oh, wait a minute, there's an employee resource group that takes care of people with disabilities or people LGBTQ. So you want to make sure you have all that information. So providing information, it might just be a simple email after they're onboarded. So what does your onboarding process look like? That's a very good question, right? So that would be the first part. The other part is, in order for it, when you're now in-house and you are hired, it's like, okay, I'm hired now. Do I want to stay here? What affects that is, how are they feeling about their environment? The mindset in the environment is critical. How are the people that are there? How do they feel? The ones that were there before you, right? The people that are making the choices to advance careers or to hire, or the people you work along with, what is the mindset like? Because sometimes the mindset has to shift to understand the diverse people coming in, right? I'll give you an easy example. If I've never in my entire life seen somebody that wears a hijab, and somebody is hired and she's wearing a hijab, if I'm not educated to know, I would have misconceptions, right? If somebody starts working, for example, and maybe they have, they're a woman, okay, and the woman has just come back, maybe she's going on maternity leave, or say she's expecting. If we don't have those conversations to understand how it's different for each person, just because I don't have a struggle in a certain space does not mean somebody else doesn't. So I think that education part of it, that is constant, it's not stopping. I think it should be refreshed. I think it should be constant, but I also think it should be made fun. Nobody likes a boring class, right? So you have to make those where they're engaging. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Those engaging sessions are really good. And then also never assuming that you know what another group needs. Ask them questions, okay? I've been lucky to work for a company where we have targeted ERGs. We have targeted groups for certain things. So for example, if you're going to talk about during this pandemic, many people are working from home, they have children, they have elderly parents. So there are committees and groups that discuss the simple things, right? Of, just figuring out Zoom for your kids. It's a big deal because if you're trying to work and your kids can't get on Zoom, it's all of those little things. Sometimes it's not the big things that's needed. It's just the simple thoughts and the simple solutions. So I think stuff like that is what we need to make sure we're actually taking a pulse of the people. What they need 6 months ago may be different from what we need now. I mean, what we needed January last year was sure different from what we need this year, right? So I think taking that pulse and being in the moment, knowing what's going on is important. And sometimes it doesn't always have to be complicated. It could be a simple survey. It could be just, you know what, we're going to do Q&A session. Let's talk. Sometimes it's as simple as that. You don't always have to have the outside resources come in and do the whole formal thing. So I think those little things, as we keep on doing them and evolve, we start seeing a lot of differences and people feel comfortable because they feel heard, they feel seen, and then they feel they can identify with people that look like them, talk like them, understand where they're coming from. That whole feeling of belonging is key. You can get a paycheck anywhere, right? How long you stay depends on, do you feel you belong? People will leave a job that is well paying and say, yeah, I just didn't feel right. I didn't feel I belonged. I didn't feel I mattered. So I think making sure you have your employees thinking that they matter is going to be a big deal to retain your employees.
Absolutely. Again, you both touched on so many important things there, and the being seen and heard and matter is such an important factor. And then ensuring that this also is for us. Whether you're championing diversity and inclusion or championing for somebody else, it's also for us to educate ourselves, teach ourselves. We can't always rely on others to educate us and teach us. We have to take that on personally as well. So again, I have one last question. I think we have time for it. I'm just going to close this out. And so coming out of International Women's Month in March, we all chose to challenge. I want to ask Adijat, what was one of your favorite responses to the challenge?
One of my favorite ones was somebody mentioned this and said, I want to be the person that has these uncomfortable conversations. Okay, I want to be the person that's speaking up for diversity in all forms and having those uncomfortable conversations. And then I thought about it, you know what? That's a good point, because if it's all comfortable, we're not doing anything. We have to shake things up a little bit. And I jokingly call myself a table shaker. You have to shake things up a little bit to get it to move. So I would say definitely speaking up for diversity and inclusion in all of its forms, but having those conversations that are, just, it's not quite, but you have to have it, those type of conversations. That would be my takeaway.
Absolutely love that. Sitting in our uncomfortability allows us to actually move from it. So that's really good. I think mine was challenge the status quo. And so that one I think ties in very nicely there. As we wrap this up, and I know we're coming to time, I really just want to thank all of you, Thomas, Shelley, Adijat, for being part of this discussion today, for sharing your insights with us. Really appreciate it, and appreciate your work in championing for diversity and inclusion, and also having these challenging, uncomfortable discussions. We need them, and we need to continue to move forward with that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.